What's cracking, everybody? New video. So I went live earlier today. Those of you that missed it, it was the sober life. And right before I got off, right before I ended my live, somebody asked me a question: if I was a father, if I was a dad, if I had kids, right? Other than my dog. And so I answered the question. You guys can go over there and look at it. But I said, you know what? Instead of doing something else, how about I do a video on something similar to that, right? On kind of like who I was back then, how I looked at people, how I looked at myself. So the other day, there was somebody that made a comment, and he told me that the decisions that I made back then are the reason why I am a failure as a man and a failure as a dad, right? It takes a lot of nerve, not balls. It takes zero balls to type that out, right? But it takes a lot of nerve to be that judgmental. I made horrible decisions, but am I a failure as a man? Nah, absolutely not. I'm a flawed man, just like that guy is. But somebody with that type of heart, that type of judgmental heart, I guarantee you has a lot of skeletons. Like I've said before, hurt people hurt people. He's hurting. He's got things to hide, probably. But I will say this. If I could turn back the hands of time and give my victim his life back, I definitely would. I wouldn't do it just so I could have a chance to be a father. I would do it because I had no right to take his life. No man has the right to take another man's life. Back when I did what I did it because I was self-centered. I was egotistical. I didn't love myself. I didn't care about myself. So I couldn't love or care about anybody else, period. Somebody had said that I should do a video on why people join gangs. I can only talk about why I did, right? And I can tell you that I think the story is similar for the majority of us, at least Raza, right? I always try to be very respectful when I talk about my childhood, because while my mom isn't here, my dad still is, and I don't want to hurt his feelings. I know that he has a lot of regret, But I think it's also important that I do touch, on certain things. I've said before that, my mom and dad, they didn't have parental figures. They didn't have that loving parent to. My grandmother was a beautiful woman, but she was married to an animal, and he was very abusive to her and to all his kids. And so my dad took to the streets. My dad was placed in a really fucked up position, and maybe someday we'll talk about that. But my dad was fighting to protect everybody in that house. And, I've told you that my family comes from Jalisco, and you guys know there's very big men out there. My grandfather was about 6'4". He's a big man. And so my dad as a kid didn't have a chance, but he fought. He tried to protect everybody in that house from the violence that was going on at the hands of his father. My mom was a product of the Ali Foster system, and so neither one of them had a parental figure. They didn't have that example of how a parent loves a child. And then here I came, and they were both very young. They were both doing drugs and drinking and partying, and growing up, I felt like that was a priority. Those were their priorities, not me. I'm sure I'm wrong now, but I'm telling you how I felt then. There was a lot of extreme violence in the house. My dad beating my mom, both parents beating me. And I knew that the neighbors knew that I was being beaten. I knew my teachers knew. Cops were called by the school because I had a lot of bruising. And nothing happened, so the cops knew. Everybody, and this led to an extreme hate for all authority figures, a distrust of all parents. I mean adults as well as authority figures. At a very young age, I was like, I'm on my own. Fuck this, it's me against the world. As a kid, as a small kid, I told you guys how I would get on my bike. I would ride my bike through the streets all day and all night. I would go and eat at the neighbors because we didn't really. There were times when we just didn't have shit in the house, and that's why it's a thing of mine. My lady could tell you guys if she would get on here, she would tell you. I can't stand to see an empty refrigerator or empty cupboards because that's what I saw as a kid. You know what I mean? But yeah, I'd be in the streets all day, man, and all night because I knew to walk in that house was to invite an ass whooping, right? And I told you guys how my dad would whistle, and I had to whistle back. If I didn't whistle back, he was gonna come looking for me, and then it was gonna be a whooping on the spot, right? So I would whistle back. If he didn't whistle again, that meant, all right, keep doing your thing. If he whistled again, that meant come home. And I'll tell you guys, there were times where I'd be out in the streets riding my bike, and my dad would whistle, I would whistle, he'd whistle back, and boom, so I would fucking book it back to the house quick. And I would ride up on my bike, and my dad would tell me, go in the house. And I would go in the house, and he would tell me, take your shoes off. And I would take my shoes off, and my dad would start packing my shoes full of money. Loosening my shoes up and just packing money in there. Then when he would put my shoes back on my feet, tie them tight, my feet would be hurting. But what had happened was, they were listening to the police scanners and thinking the Judas were going to raid. So they're ready to get rid of whatever drugs are in the house, but they needed that money to recop. And there I was, a kid, could feel my heart beat in my feet. My shoes are all swollen with money. And I'm out there riding my bike. And I'm going to ride that bike until they whistle again, till he whistles again to come home. And it's funny because when I have brought up stories, not stories like that, but other things that went on, my dad doesn't remember any of it. And I get it. He doesn't remember because he doesn't want to. Unfortunately, I remember. But see, I'm a different person now. So for me, it was while I was on my bike, like I said last time, I would see the cholos. They had respect. People feared them. They did whatever they want. I would see Judas drive by them and they'd be flipping the Judas, fuck you, suck my dick, and the Judas would just keep going. And I was like, wow, that's where it's at. Unfortunately, because of the insecurities that I had of feeling abandoned and unloved and all this stuff, I wasn't going to be okay with just being from the neighborhood. And that's why at 13, I'm my own a little renegade. I started my own clique in my neighborhood, right? And when I was in YA, I was somebody who ran a dorm. I've always had, when I had that when I was controlled by those insecurities, which you mask with ego, become self-centered. It's all to hide that little scared kid that's still inside of you. I wasn't okay with being the regular guy. YA for an example, like, oh, damn, that Vato's crazy. That Vato's crazy. I'm gonna get down with them. That's what you did, seeking that acceptance. So for me, that's what it was, man. I was looking for love in all the wrong places, basically. And no matter how hard you look in them streets for love, it ain't gonna be there. As dysfunctional as my family was, they did love me. I just couldn't see it. I was too wrapped up in my own shit, right? And One of the coldest crosses to bear for myself. I think I told this story before, but I want to tell you guys right now. So I was a fuck up from jump. I would fight constantly. I'd get beat up at home and I'd go and fight at school and beat people up. You know, again, hurt people. I was trying to just transfer it, I guess. I don't know, but I would, I would get beat for getting suspended, and then as soon as I was done with my suspension, I'd go and fight again and get suspended. It was just a cold cycle, right? But check this out. I was, breaking into stuff and, breaking laws. And so at 13, some bullshit happened. I was there. It wasn't even me, right? And it was the cops actually let us go. And my mom decided that she wanted to teach me a lesson, right? And when I got to the pad, she called the cops and told them that she wanted to talk to the victim, right? And she convinced the victim to press charges against me because she thought, this fucker always gets away with everything. He's never going to learn because he thinks he's fucking untouchable. And she got that guy to press charges. And the cops came to arrest me, and this cop already hated my guts, and he was looking at me like, yeah, motherfucker, we got you, right? And I remember, keep it real, I remember I was so mad at my mom. Like, I hated her. I didn't get along with my parents, man, back then especially. And I remember when I looked at her, and I told her, you just ruined my fucking life. I said, this is Santa Barbara, because my mom's from LA. I said, this is Santa Barbara. I said, once you get in the system here, you're done, right? And I told her, my life's over now, and you did this. They walked me out. I went to juvenile hall. I got out whenever I got out, probably like a week later, whatever it was. And within a little over a year, I was in YA. And I did my YA time, and I got out for 5 months, and I caught that murder. Was fighting the death penalty, beat that on 995 motion, and then got a life sentence. And you know what? I forgot about that day. It wasn't a big thing for me, but my mom never did. Because from that day on, I was, from my first arrest till I was released at 43, I didn't even have a year and a half on the streets, right? And it wasn't until later, way later, when I realized the damage I did when I made that statement to my mom, when I accused her of ruining my life, when I was the one making all the poor decisions. I noticed the depression in her letters. It got to the point because I was doing my thing, right? This was doing prison. I was doing my thing. I didn't care about what was happening on the streets. And my mom was writing me letters, and she was pouring her heart out. And to me, it was just a fucking headache. I didn't want those letters. Live your life. I'm living mine, right? But one thing, she used to blame herself, and I used to always tell her, listen, when I was in a diaper, when you were breastfeeding me, I needed you to survive. But as soon as I figured out how to make my own decisions, they were my decisions. They were never yours. Anything I'm in jail for, anything I ever went to jail for, is because of something I did. But you know what? My mom wouldn't let those words go. And so when the riot happened in Pelican Bay, February 23rd of 2000, that was the breaking point for my mom. She killed herself. We think it was June 14th. 4 months later, after the riot. I can just imagine every day my mom wondering, what's my son doing? What's my son going through? Because remember, there was world news. It broke in on the world news. Today Show, Good Morning America, everything. My mom saw that, and she couldn't cope with it. So that's something that I live with all the time, man, and, like I said in the beginning, if I could turn back the hands of time, I would give my victim his life back. Again, not for me, but because he didn't have it coming. And somebody had asked, when I told the story at the end of my live, when I talked about how how happy I was when my ex got pregnant. And when I looked at her, she was crying, and I asked her, what are you crying for? Ain't you happy? This is what we wanted, right? And she said, you just did 3 years. It was 3 years and 3 months or whatever. But she was like, you just did 3 years. And why? I can't do this. I'm afraid you're going to go back. You're going to leave me out here with a kid, and I can't do this. I'm on. And I said, man, I promise you I'm not going back. And it was a few weeks later, grand jury indicted me. Special circumstances of lying in wait, trying to hit me with a death penalty. And, people ask me when I said that on the live, did you forget you told her that? No, I just didn't care. It wasn't that I didn't love her and I didn't want to be a dad. It was that my insecurities were that strong, my ego. See, you got to remember, when somebody is controlled by their ego, it's because they're covering up an insecurity. Think about that. When you meet somebody who's just self-centered, what is it that they feel they're lacking? Because they're probably not lacking that at all. Confidence, maybe, But when people don't know who they are, it's because they haven't been through the fire. That's why when I did the live the other day and I got dumb again, those are the things that really bother me. It's how could I forget even for a second? I know who I am. I know what I am. But I also know that there are forces out there. I'm not talking about a human being that don't like seeing people do good. That's why it's so hard to do good. The easy thing is to always do bad, right? It's a shortcut to always do bad. But anyways, I guess this video is long enough, man. Hopefully this helped those that were asking certain questions. And really, man, I really, really, really want to stress to people, no matter how mad you get at somebody that you love or just anybody that you have to interact with, understand that your words, you can't erase them. When somebody hears them, those words stay in their heart and their mind forever. So try to speak positive words, reassuring words when you can. If it's something you got to say that's negative, think it through, because it could really hurt somebody. You know what I'm saying? You don't know how treacherous the tongue really is, man, until you abuse it, right? Or you abuse somebody with it. And, like I said, man, my mom, I said something to her when I was 13, and it never went away. But anyways, you guys stay safe, stay smart, and tell the ones you love that you love them, right? I'm out.